Hi, everyone. I'm here with my friend and fellow author, Joylene Butler, who has a new book out, and that's why we're here to talk about her new book. Welcome, Jolene.
Hi, Hank.
Before we get into the book, can you give us a little background on yourself?
Well, I've been writing for 39 years, almost 39 years. Um, I started as a child. My mother bought me a diary and I started and as soon as I learned how to write. And I couldn't describe the feeling, but I knew that there was something going on inside my body because every time I sat down with a pen and a piece of paper, I felt alive, excited, like passionate about something. I just couldn't articulate it at that time. But so I lost my dad when I was 30, and I thought, well, I was grieving really badly because I was daddy's girl. And so I thought I'll write him a story about him and keep him alive forever. And 7 years later, I wrote at night because I had 5 kids and I worked full time. So I wrote at night. And when I was finished 7 years later, I read it and it was horrible, but I was hooked on the process. So I started my first novel, which was Dead Witness, about, a week later, because I couldn't stop. I've been writing for so long and on an IBM computer. So I knew I couldn't give it up. And it took me a couple of years to write Dead Witness. And then within about 3 months of finishing it, I already had Kiss of the Assassin, which was my second book. I was starting on that one then. And I've been writing ever since. And actually, this is the first time I've not been writing, because since I finished this last book, that I haven't published it yet, but I've taken a vacation. So it's a little bit weird.
Yeah. Okay, so what is this new book about? Was it Kiss of the Assassin?
Yes, it's about a Russian Soviet that was found in a camp during in the 50s by the head of the militia at the time, and her mother commits suicide after killing her father, and the head of the militia was at the camp at the time, and he knew she was traumatized, so he took her in as his ward and trained her to be an assassin because he had very big political aspirations. And over the course of her young life, she realizes that she's just a tool for him. So when things get really bad, she defects to the United States and he sends people after her. And it's just about her struggle to stay alive and to find peace in a normal life in a very crazy world that he's created for her. So I don't exactly know where I got the idea from, but it occurred to me that I thought that we can recover from trauma, that as human beings, we're very resilient. And I wrote the story in the 90s, early 90s. So I'm guessing that that's what my primary motivation was, that I wanted to write a book about a child surviving the most horrendous trauma.
Okay. I understand this has a bit of history behind it. Would you like to tell us about that?
I wrote it. It took me a while. I did about a year's research, and I found a helicopter chief in the United States to help me with it. After I went on all the forums where all the veterans were gathering for support for each other, and I started asking. I was looking for that time. At that time, I was looking for a mentor. So I thought, well, I'll just go where they are, and I got some very angry replies back, and most of them thought, well, they were enraged that I would infringe myself upon them, even in that small way, and that Vietnam had nothing to do with me. I was a teenager during the war. And so I just kept looking, and finally one of the fellows that was on the forum that saw these messages, that I was getting really nasty messages. I suspect he felt bad, so he contacted me and said that sure, he would talk to me. And when I explained to him what I was trying to do, because Vietnam was very big in our lives when we were kids. I mean, it was on the television 24/7. And
Yeah,
in those
was,
days, we
yeah.
didn't have the internet, and we didn't have, you know, YouTube and all these other things. So when you're television, that's all you see on television, it makes an impact. So we can rather understand how kids today must feel when everywhere they look, all it is, you know, whatever is the worst thing that's going on at the time. Right now, it's Ukraine. But anyway, so he helped me, and he gave me assignments, and he gave me all the list of books to read. And over the course of the next 5 or 6 months, he gave me assignments. I had to write articles and just scenarios. And then when I finally wrote the piece, when I was finished, and I wrote the section in the book at the beginning that's centered in Vietnam, he said, well, my work is done. And that was the end of that. So I lost his contact information after 9/11. So I mean, I don't even know if he's alive now, but so I dedicated the book to him, and hopefully he's still around somewhere, because I couldn't have done it without him. It's one thing to read textbooks. It's another thing to actually talk to somebody who's willing to tell you what the day-to-day life was like.
Yeah, the people who have actually experienced it.
Yes. Yeah, and we didn't talk about his participation other than what his job was. And I think it would have been pretty rough, because he was in charge of landing zones and pickups and, you know,
Yeah,
and stuff that he didn't talk about when I didn't need to know. I just wanted to
yeah,
sense what it was like, because the scene is from a male perspective. So it's difficult enough to talk or write a story in someone else's perspective, but when you're writing it from as a woman in a man's perspective, I wanted it to be as credible and as believable and as authentic as I could possibly make it. And I think I succeeded. I hope.
okay. So getting it published wasn't easy either, was it?
No. As soon as I finished, I started querying publishers, because I was already at this point. I knew it was a good book, and it took quite a while to write. So I queried all of them. I don't think I missed anybody. And if I did miss them, it's because they weren't publishers at that time. So I was starting to stack up a big pile of rejection letters, and a few, I would say, of the ones I did receive, and say I'm guessing maybe 30 that bothered to answer my admission or submission. I'd say 80 to 90% of them said nobody's interested in Vietnam. And so this would have been 20 years, not even 20, well, okay, maybe 20 years after the war was over. So in the mid 90s. So I thought it was enough time, but apparently it wasn't. And at the time too, movies were coming out, not, you know, and all the big Hollywood movies. And so I was naive to believe that people were still interested. And as I queried more, I took a break and I wrote my other novels. I've written 5 so far, but I was writing the other ones. So I did take breaks between querying. And then when I got back into it, a couple of publishers were interested, but they wanted me to change the logistics to Bosnia first. The first guy wanted me to change them. I mean, it took a year out of my life to research. I was just too lazy to do it. I couldn't change it. I didn't have an emotional connection to Bosnia. I mean, I was watching it on the news, but I really didn't understand the war, not the way I understood Vietnam. So I passed on that idea and just thought, well, I'll just keep going. And when I finally did have, at one time I had 3 publishers, And so I thought, well, I'll just ask them. And none of them wanted to take it on. They said it was too dark. Um, it's a violent book, I guess. It's not as violent as some of the ones I've read, but it's implied. The violence is implied and the trauma is implied. So people hesitated to take it on, yet at the time, all the books were vampire stories. I wasn't in the gist of what was going on. So I hung in there. And then I finally got another publisher, and they unfortunately went under because of COVID. So she said, I know somebody that I think would be interested. So she contacted me, my publisher in New York, and they said, absolutely. The next day, like I queried them at 10 o'clock at night, and by 9 o'clock in the morning, I was signed. So that was quite a contrast to what, the 30 odd years I've been trying to publish this book. And
So the moral is don't give up.
yes, absolutely. And, I think it's kind of funny too, because I hear a lot of stories about writers who waited 7 years or 5 years or 10 years. And I think,
You have
I
the
beat
record.
ya. I beat you. Yeah. 30 years. So yeah, because I finished it in 1992. So, and then I did take a lot of breaks from it because it was a very intense book to write. But it's a love story at its core, and people can survive a lot of stuff. So
Yes.
I wanted that to reiterate that too.
So I've read this book. I read it before the publisher went out of business because of COVID. And I've been holding on to a 5-star review ever since.
Oh,
And when it's published in about 2 weeks, I'm going to post this on every place I can find. If I can find the bloody file, after 2 years, it's kind of hard to remember where I put it.
yeah,
think
I
can find it.
understand. I've got that problem.
It's definitely a 5-star review. It is a great book. And
too.
I remember after I read this book, I sent you an email and I said, I don't understand why the hell you aren't a best-selling author. Because it is a great book. I really do believe it. And I've read a lot of your other books too, and I thought they were great too. So I don't know, well, I guess there's a lot of luck involved. So I think you should be a best-selling author.
Oh, I appreciate
My
that.
personal opinion, for what it matters, which is very little.
No, it's important. It's important. I once had a Vietnam vet. I sent it to him just because I thought, well, my brother was a vet, so he suggested I should find somebody willing to read it and critique
Yeah.
it. So I did. I sent it to a Vietnam vet, and he asked me when I had been in country. Now I credit that to the chief that helped me out, because he made me look at it from a realistic, like he made me live that moment, And the nice thing too is that I did get to go to Indonesia in 2019. So I have a small sense of although so much has changed since then, but I do have a sense of the setting that I was describing, because it's very plush and green and
Jungles.
yeah, beautiful countries.
Yeah. So before we wrap this up, what's your plans? Do you have another book and then you're thinking about?
Yes, I've just finished a novel or a manuscript called Shattered, and it's about an English professor at Simon Fraser University. He's an expat from the United States, and he has autism. And his wife is hit and run in Gastown, Vancouver, and she's his world. She was what held him together. She was his glue, and he's devastated. So emotionally, he's in search. He's investigating her death. And Mike Canaday, who's in my first novel, Dead Witness, he hires him, and they go to England to find out why his wife was run down purposely. So that one's in the hands of another publisher. So I'm waiting.
Okay, so we'll probably have another interview pretty soon then.
Oh, that would be nice, Hank.
Yeah.
So you take care and give my best to Pat.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks.
Well, thanks.
Bye.